The first frost of autumn clings stubbornly to the thatched rooftops, a brittle lace of white against the bruised sky. Dawn struggles through clouds heavy with memory, casting a gray pall over the village, as if the world itself were mourning. Smoke curls from half-extinguished hearths, carrying the acrid scent of ash and the thin, bitter tang of meager stews that promise sustenance yet deliver little. Inside, the villagers stir in silence, bodies bent beneath invisible weights, each breath a soft confession of hunger. Children press against their mothers' skirts, faces pale and pinched, eyes wide with a fear that has no name. The chill bites through the thin layers of wool, but the cold is less cruel than the gnawing ache in their bellies. Every murmur of the wind through the eaves is a threat, every shadow a reminder of what has been lost. The fields, once rich and proud, lie fallow. Mud cracks beneath the frost, the last stalks of grain brittle and brown, snapping with the faintest pressure, like the fragile lives tethered to them. A crow caws from the ridge, wings black against the rising light, its cry a mocking herald over the barren hills. The village priest moves quietly from home to home, bell in hand, its hollow toll scraping through the air, a feeble attempt to ward off despair. His lips move soundlessly, prayers whispered to a god whose attention seems elsewhere, lost among the frost and fog. Some villagers glance toward him, eyes flickering with faint hope, but it is a hope tempered by experience, hardened into something near resignation. One farmer leans against the rusted iron handle of his plow, staring toward the horizon where crows wheel in ominous patterns. He breathes in the damp, earthy scent of rot from spoiled grain and fallen leaves, a pungent reminder that effort is no shield against the relentlessness of famine. Hunger here is not abstract. It is the ache of bones, the raw, gnawing pain in the stomach, the weight pressing down on every step. The air smells of decay, of mud, of the faint smoke from the hearths, all mingling into a constant, suffocating reminder that survival is not guaranteed. Mothers measure out the last crumbs of bread with trembling hands, their fingers white from both cold and exhaustion. Eyes glisten with tears they dare not shed, knowing that each bite given is a sacrifice that may save a life today but condemn another tomorrow. Fathers wander the fields aimlessly, hands in the dirt, searching for seed, for fruit, for anything that might stave off the coming hunger. Their faces are carved from worry, eyes hollowed by nights of thinking too long on futures they cannot reach. The wind moves through the skeletal remains of hedgerows, carrying with it a lament that rustles through the empty fields. A lone windmill groans as its sails turn against nothing but barren soil, a futile monument to a labor that has ceased to feed, to shelter, to promise. The sound is a low moan that mirrors the villager's own, a whispering echo of despair stitched into the landscape itself. Somewhere, a bell tolls. Its hollow clang marks a life lost, swallowed almost instantly by the heavy darkness, the fog absorbing grief as if it were another layer of frost. Even the animals are subdued. Goats huddle together, their flanks shivering, cattle thin as shadows in the frost-bitten paddocks. Every creature bears witness to the famine's quiet tyranny, each breath a reminder of the fragile thread on which life hangs. Rats gnaw at the edges of stores that are already too meager, their presence both menace and companion in the long, cold hours of night. Hunger does not discriminate. It strips flesh, dignity, and hope alike, leaving only the raw skeleton of endurance. At dusk, the village gathers as if drawn by a magnetic grief. The priest rings his bell again, and for a fleeting moment, the sound binds the living and the dying. Faces are illuminated by the dim glow of embers, eyes reflecting both terror and the stubborn flame of defiance. The old speaks softly of winters past, of harder times survived, of losses endured, trying to anchor the young to a legacy of resilience even as famine gnaws at the foundation of all they know. A young mother hums a quiet lullaby, a song of comfort over the hollow cries of children, though her own lips quiver with suppressed despair. Night falls like a heavy cloak, and the village retreats into a silence so complete it feels alive, pressing against the ribs, against the mind. Only the wind dares move freely now, slipping through cracks in doors, rustling the thatch overhead, carrying with it the scent of frost, earth, and rot. Somewhere beyond the fields, a fox prowls, its keen eyes reflecting the moon, alert to opportunity in a world grown lean and unforgiving. The villagers' fires dim, shadows stretching and merging with the night, each flicker a reminder that even light is temporary, fleeting, and fragile. Yet in the midst of despair, small acts of defiance endure. Hands clasp in prayer, eyes meet across the frost-hardened square, and hearts cling stubbornly to memory and to hope. A father lifts his child for warmth, whispering promises that may not be kept, yet are spoken with conviction, because to speak at all is to resist the erasure that hunger seeks. A mother presses her lips to the crown of a child's head, tears frozen on her cheeks. And in that touch, in that fleeting warmth, the essence of life asserts itself. The night deepens, and with it comes the hush of expectation, the uneasy calm before another day carved from frost and struggle. Somewhere, a bell tolls again, quieter this time, almost tentative, as if uncertain of its own resonance. It calls to the living to remember, to endure, to brace against the certainty of loss. Hunger has stripped the village bare, but it has not yet stripped its spirit entirely. In the hush between the tolls, in the space between heartbeats, the villagers wait, watch, and hope, caught in the liminal edge between despair and survival. And as the first stars pierce the cold sky, fragile and distant, the frost on the rooftops glitters with a deceptive beauty. It is a silent witness to endurance, a frozen testament to lives that cling stubbornly to the thin thread of tomorrow. The wind rises once more, carrying with it the scent of what has been lost and what may yet come. And in the darkness, the village dreams in small, trembling increments of warmth, of harvests not yet withered, of hands once again able to feed rather than grasp at emptiness. In this quiet, bitter night, the story of human resilience begins its slow, unyielding march forward. A wagon creaks along the rutted road, its wheels grinding against stone and mud with a reluctant rhythm. Each groan of wood is a sigh of exhaustion, each turn a whisper of the burdens carried within. Sacks of barley sit atop the cart, their contents pitifully meager, insufficient to feed the hollowed mouths that follow behind. The air tastes of cold and damp straw, carries the sharp tang of fear, and seems to bend under the weight of unspoken despair. Villagers trudge in silence, faces pale beneath the frost, hands trembling not from cold alone but from the gnawing ache of emptiness. Each step leaves a shallow imprint in the frozen earth. Yet even the ground seems to recoil, as if mourning the scarcity that has invaded every corner of life. In the market square, the remnants of life gather like ghosts. Merchants huddle near splintered stalls, voices low and cautious, murmuring of failed harvests and blackened fields. Their eyes dart like frightened animals, scanning for shadows that might carry ruin. Barrels stand half empty, their surfaces slick with frost, and the smell of damp wood mingles with a faint, acrid stench of spoiled grain. A basket of turnips sits untouched, bruised and wilted, its edges curling like dry parchment. Here, the pulse of community beats in hushed, anxious tones, a rhythm punctuated by the occasional cough or sigh, each one a tiny echo of the famine that refuses to relent. A young girl moves through the square, hair matted with frost, strands clinging to her cheeks like shards of ice. Her small hands clutch a piece of stale bread, pressing it to her chest as if it were a talisman, the only protection against hunger's creeping shadow. Her eyes, wide and glimmering, scan the scene with both curiosity and fear, the innocence of childhood gnawed away by months of watching others waste away. Her mother follows close behind, shoulders hunched beneath the weight of worry, eyes hollowed with exhaustion. Her hands are red and cracked, stained by wood, by dough, by the relentless labor of survival. She moves as though through a dream, each motion deliberate, each breath measured against the scarcity that threatens to undo them. Smoke drifts lazily from distant chimneys, a gray veil that blurs the horizon, shrouding homes too cold to offer warmth. The air trembles with quiet despair. Even the wind carries the weight of famine, rattling shutters and whispering through the empty spaces between houses. In the distance, the Lord rides past, mounted on a mare whose ribs pierce through a dull, patchy hide. His fur cloak is a mockery of opulence in a land stripped bare, the symbol of privilege and power dangling over lives already hollowed by want. The villagers avert their eyes, a mixture of fear and resignation curling their lips as the sound of hooves on frozen mud becomes a cruel percussion of inequality. Children move silently, playing a game of shadows on the walls of crumbling houses, imitating soldiers and hunters with sticks and frayed scraps of cloth. Their laughter is quiet, brittle, as though each sound might fracture beneath the weight of reality. Hunger has already turned the strongest of their companions into thin, trembling ghosts, eyes sunken, cheeks hollow, a pallor that seems to sap the air of color. Even in play, there is a knowledge that the body betrays the mind, that strength is a fragile gift in a world ruled by scarcity. Their shadows stretch across the frozen earth, merging and splitting, tiny specters against the cold, gray light of the dying day. Every footstep on the frozen road echoes with unnatural clarity. The crunch of ice beneath boots and hooves becomes a rhythm of survival, a testament to the resilience and fragility intertwined in human flesh. The village exhales in unison, each breath a wisp of white smoke, a visible reminder of the heat that clings to bones and escapes with ease. Even the animals, cattle and dogs alike, move with careful deliberation, muscles taut, coats matted, their eyes dull with hunger. The landscape itself seems to mourn, the wind bending trees into silent, supplicating forms, the soil hard and cracked beneath the frost, unyielding to the pleas of seed or root. At dusk, a bell tolls across the village, its sound resonant and hollow, marking curfew. The vibration moves through walls, through frozen ground, through the hearts of all who hear. It is a ritual of order in a world slowly unraveling, a signal that the day, with all its hunger and toil, has ended, and yet tomorrow will bring no relief. People return to their homes, dragging weary limbs behind them, faces etched with lines of survival, eyes reflecting the dim glow of dying fires. A mother kneels by a hearth, feeding the embers as if coaxing life from ashes, while the girl watches, fingers tracing the scarred wood, imagining warmth in the flicker of light. Evening settles with a quiet insistence. The gray sky deepens, clouds dragging shadows across frozen fields, over homes stripped of comfort, over the lingering smoke from distant chimneys. Hunger is not spoken aloud, yet it pervades every gesture, every faltering breath. It is carried in the mother's careful rationing of bread, in the girl's small hands guarding a morsel as though it were gold, in the silent acceptance of those too weary to speak. It is a relentless companion, invisible yet undeniable, shaping the rhythm of life, bending the will, etching despair into the marrow. In the hush of night, the village holds its breath, knowing that scarcity is patient, and that it will return with the dawn. Somewhere in the shadowed corner of the square, an old man leans against a frost-covered wall, eyes closed, listening. He remembers summers when wheat grew golden beneath the sun, when the market square teemed with laughter, when children's cheeks glowed with health instead of gaunt emptiness. Those days are now memory, fragile and fading, slipping like smoke through fingers. Yet even in this season of want, there is a stubborn pulse of life. The girl clutches her bread, the mother feeds the hearth, and the wagon continues its creaking passage through mud and stone. Life persists, though it bends beneath the strain, though every heartbeat is a negotiation with the hunger that rules the land. As night deepens, the bell toll fades into silence, replaced by the subtle music of wind across frozen roofs and the occasional cough of a child. The village, held in the fragile embrace of darkness, seems both vulnerable and enduring. Each home is a citadel against despair, each ember a flicker of hope, however small. The moon casts pale light over frost-rimmed fields, illuminating the paths of the weary, the shadows of the lost, the persistence of those who refuse to vanish under famine's weight. Tomorrow will bring another day of struggle, another test of endurance, but for this moment, the village breathes in quiet solidarity, bound together by hunger, by memory, and by the faint, stubborn flame of survival. The sun rises weakly over the valley, a pale and trembling orb behind a wall of fog that clings to the slopes like a shroud. The dew on the grass glistens with frost, fragile crystals that crackle beneath the weight of a tentative wind, and the world feels suspended between life and death. Every breath exhales a visible ghost, curling and twisting in the chill, mingling with the coppery tang of iron-rich soil and the faint decay of long-forgotten hay. Winter is not yet here, but its shadow has already stretched across the village, and the land carries the promise of hardship in every frozen blade of grass. In the heart of a small stone cottage, a mother crouches over a hearth too weak to chase the chill from the room. Her hands, knotted and trembling, stir a thin pot of porridge, each motion a quiet testament to exhaustion. The infant in her arms wails, a small, rasping sound that pierces the brittle silence, a cry born of hunger so ancient and primal it seems to echo from the soil itself. She hums a soft, trembling tune, a prayer disguised as lullaby, but the song is swallowed by the cold. The aroma of the porridge is weak, almost nothing, failing to mask the metallic tang of stone dampened by frost, or the sour scent of hay that has begun to rot in the corners. Hunger hangs in the air, an invisible fog heavier than any winter mist. Outside, the men labor in silence, their spades scraping the frozen earth as if drawing secrets from the soil. They dig for root vegetables, tubers forgotten in the freeze, each clod of dirt turned over a quiet testament to the futility of survival. Fingers grow numb, backs curve against the wind, and yet the work must be done. Every unsuccessful dig is a whispered defeat, an acknowledgement that life is precarious and fragile, balanced on the edge of hunger and despair. The only companion is the low, intermittent whine of a dog curled in the stable, ribs jutting through matted fur, a living shadow of the scarcity that defines this season. From the village church, bells toll, not in celebration, not in joy, but in remembrance. Each peal carries the weight of absent bodies, of children who will not wake, of mothers whose arms will remain empty. The smoke from candles and incense drifts upward, curling into the gray sky, carrying with it whispered names and prayers, hopes for mercy that taste of ash on the tongue. Faith has not vanished, but it is strained, stretched thin like the fraying edges of a cloth that has seen generations of use. The villagers' prayers are not for abundance, but for survival, for the stubborn persistence of warmth, of food, of life itself. In the market, the hollow clatter of empty baskets echoes along frost-covered boards. Tables that once overflowed with produce now bear only remnants, the occasional beet or turnip, dulled by frost and time. Women barter scraps of fabric for the faintest hint of grain, movements measured and wary, eyes sharp, bodies tense. Their calculations are not only for survival but for the tenuous thread of dignity that keeps fear from fully devouring them. The wind carries the faint scent of distant fires, the smoke of neighbors fleeing or succumbing, leaving behind only shadows, the faint imprint of what once was. Each passing day brings uncertainty. Each ration is a gamble with mortality. Evening falls like a shroud, the light seeping from the world as if the sun itself has given up the struggle. Shadows creep along walls, lengthening, curling, swallowing the frost-bitten earth in darkness. Families gather in their meager cottages, huddled close for warmth, for comfort, for the illusion of security. The soundscape is sparse yet alive. The rustle of straw under the soles of feet, the distant howl of wolves breaking the silence, a reminder that the wild encroaches on every boundary the villagers try to maintain. Hunger sharpens senses, frays nerves, and yet, amid the tension, small gestures. An extra sip of porridge offered to a neighbor, a shared scrap of bread, carry the weight of miracles. In these acts, fear and compassion intermingle, fragile and trembling. At the edges of the village, frost crests on broken fences and abandoned tools. Roofs sag under the first whispers of snow, wooden beams groaning under their burden. Smoke curls from chimneys, thin and pale, struggling to rise through the damp, biting air. Every home is a fragile bastion against the cold. Every hearth a flickering defiance of the dark that seeps into stone, into bone, into memory. Stories of past winters echo in the minds of the old, tales of famine and survival, of neighbors who vanished like mist, of children who cried themselves into silence. History is not a distant thing here. It is present in every frostbitten finger, in every hollow-eyed gaze, in the brittle tension of every rationed meal. In this valley of muted light, the land itself seems an enemy. Trees stand skeletal, their branches stripped bare, creaking in the wind as if whispering warnings. The soil, hardened by frost, resists life, and even the streams run sluggish, murky with sediments stirred by the relentless cold. Yet, in this struggle, there is motion, persistence, an almost defiant heartbeat. The villagers plant what they can, tend what remains, barter what little they possess. Their movements are ritualized, a silent choreography of survival, a testament to the human spirit pressed against the edges of despair. Night descends fully, and the village folds into itself. Torches gutter in the wind, their flames trembling like fragile spirits. Silence becomes a living thing, pressing against doors, seeping through cracks in walls, muting even the most stubborn whispers. Outside, shadows stretch long and strange, hiding dangers that prowl the borders of human habitation. Wolves, vagrants, starvation itself. Yet, within this oppressive quiet, there is also a fragile intimacy, a sense that even in scarcity, there is connection. Hands clasp over shared spoons. A shivering body is pulled closer to warmth. A wordless understanding passes between neighbors whose survival depends on each other. And in the deepest hush of night, as the wind sifts frost across the frozen ground, a question lingers in the air. How long can this fragile balance endure? How long can hope persist in the shadow of relentless cold, of emptiness, of the silent tally of those already lost? The mother rocks her child, hums a lullaby she barely remembers, and for a moment, time seems to hold its breath. Outside, the frost glints under the moonlight, the bones of the land bare and exposed. Tomorrow they will rise again, dig again, barter again. And still, they will cling to the small, stubborn defiance of life. As the village sleeps, or what passes for it in these lean months, the valley exhales a long, mist-laden sigh. The wolves howl in the distance, and the church bells wait for the next toll, the next remembrance. Each breath, each heartbeat, each rationed meal is a rebellion against the darkness. And in this delicate struggle, this frostbitten existence, the story of survival continues, unfolding slowly, painfully, beautifully, like the fragile first light of a winter sun. The mill turns slowly, a weary sentinel in a world of gray. Its wooden gears groan, dampened by the drizzle that has no end. Each creak a cry of exhaustion, a lament for seasons lost. Water streaks down the stone walls, tracing jagged paths through moss and rot, and the air inside carries the pungent mix of wet stone, mold, and grain too old to sustain life. It is a smell that speaks of failure, of hope corroded by relentless rain. Outside, the fields stretch in muted despair, furrows filled with puddles and the hushed ghosts of crops that never grew. Children press their faces to the window panes, their breath fogging the glass. Eyes wide and unblinking, they watch the mud swallowing what was meant to feed them, watching their futures dissolve into the gray. Their small hands leave wet prints against the cold glass, a trace of fleeting warmth, a defiance against the emptiness outside. Somewhere in the distance, a dog whines, a hollow sound that echoes the hollow stomachs and hearts of the villagers. A widow moves through the village, her back bent beneath the weight of a basket filled not with food but with weeds she hopes will pass for greens. Her hands are blistered and bleeding, the skin split and raw from endless labor that offers only the illusion of sustenance. Each step she takes is a negotiation with pain, a defiance against the body's weakening. She pauses to look at the hut that once held laughter, now silent, the doorway framing absence like a portrait. She lowers her gaze to the basket again, the weeds trembling in her grip, a trembling that mirrors the quiver of her own hope. Her husband hobbles behind her, once strong, now hollowed by hunger. His ribs show beneath threadbare clothing, shadows etched into living flesh, every movement a silent protest against weakness. His eyes, sunken yet searching, seek fragments of the life they once knew. Each step is measured, deliberate, a negotiation with gravity and despair. He reaches the churchyard, where fresh graves crowd the earth, dark soil disturbed by hands that tremble less from fatigue than from grief. The wooden crosses are small, inadequate markers for lives extinguished, and the ground seems to hold the weight of every lost breath, every unspoken prayer, every silent scream. Smoke rises from simple hearths, carrying warmth and quiet despair in equal measure. It curls upward, mingling with mist, a ghostly bridge between the present and memory. It smells of burnt grain and damp firewood, of meals that were never enough, of the lingering ache of absence. Through the village, voices speak in whispers, words brittle as the crusts of bread shared with trembling hands. Conversation is ritual, survival, the fragile weave that binds the living to one another in a tapestry frayed at every edge. Each syllable carries history not in books but in bones, in muscle, in the shadows beneath eyelids heavy with sleepless nights. The church bell tolls. Its voice rolls over the mist like a solemn drum, vibrating through cold bones and hollow hearts. Each note reminds them of mortality, of the days measured not in the sun's passage but in the dwindling of food. Children flinch at the sound, clinging to one another, as if touch alone might stave off the reality of hunger. In the market square, a single cart creaks under the weight of meager offerings, a lone symbol of human persistence against overwhelming despair. The bell tolls again, echoing into the fields, into the forests that hold predators unseen, reminding all that life is fragile, precarious, and constantly claimed by the shadow of absence. Rain falls heavier now, a relentless cloak of cold and silence. It seeps through roofs, gathers in the hollows of mud-caked streets, drips from eaves into puddles that reflect the gray sky above. Children huddle beneath torn cloaks, clutching each other as if warmth might be shared, as if hope could be transferred from one small body to another. The widow lifts her basket again, walking past the graves, her footsteps swallowed by the earth, a quiet insistence against surrender. The old man follows, shuffling, leaning on both staff and memory, the weight of years pressing him into the wet ground. Yet still he moves, still he persists. In the silence between raindrops, the village exhales. Every soul carries the imprint of loss, etched into hands and faces, into posture and gait. Yet there is defiance hidden in the mundane, in the shared crust of bread, in the whispered words, in the simple act of rising each morning to meet the same gray sky. Shadows stretch long and cold across the mud, touching the graves, the mill, the skeletal crops, as if trying to remind the living that survival is a thin, trembling thread. Night comes as a slow curtain, swallowing the village in silvered darkness. The rain turns into a whisper. The wind carries a chill that seeps into bone. Windows glow dimly with hearth fire, fragile beacons in the unending gray. In each home, a prayer is whispered, a memory recalled, a hope clutched like a talisman. The mill turns, still, groaning under the weight of water and sorrow, its wheel a heartbeat in the quiet despair. Outside, the bell tolls one final time, a morning sound for the day, for the season, for the lives hung between life and absence. The widow sets her basket down by the fire, hands trembling, eyes lifted to the smoke rising and twisting, imagining the faces of those lost, imagining a future that might still hold nourishment, laughter, and light. Her husband kneels beside her, pressing a hand to her back, both of them listening to the hollow music of the wind through broken rooftops. Children press their faces to fogged windows once more, shadows of longing in their eyes, seeing not just the ruined fields but the faint glimmer of something that might one day return. And in that fragile moment, when the world seems suspended between despair and hope, the rain's rhythm softens, the mill creaks a final lament for the day, and the night draws its heavy curtain over the village. Every soul holds its breath, every heart a quiet drum of survival, as the question lingers in the damp air. Will the next dawn bring bread, or only more silence? The wind stirs the dead leaves along the cobblestone streets, dragging them in ragged spirals, a dance of decay beneath the pale eye of a reluctant moon. It carries with it the scent of smoke, thin and acrid, mingled with the faint, cloying sweetness of rot. Shadows cling to the edges of houses, long and hungry, stretching across the frozen ground as if to claim whatever warmth remains. A boy drags an empty sack behind him, the coarse rope handle biting into his palm, his small fingers red with cold and grime. He searches the streets for grains carelessly dropped, each kernel a fragment of life, each morsel a fragile promise. The clatter of his steps against stone echoes like a heartbeat in the silence, a reminder that even in this emptiness, someone still moves, still seeks. Inside the darkened kitchens, women huddle over embers, their faces lit by the orange glow, eyes hollow but determined. They stir water into thin gruel, watching the pale liquid curl and shimmer. The smell of burnt wood mingles with the faint tang of sour milk, a scent that both sustains and sickens, a reminder that survival is often bitter. Their hands are raw and trembling, scarred from years of toil, yet they move with practiced care, coaxing sustenance from nothing. Occasionally, one leans back, inhaling the smoke, and whispers a prayer so soft it could be swallowed by the hearth's hiss. Let them live, let them eat. But even the air seems deaf, carrying their words away into the cold night. Above them, the castle looms, gray and indifferent. Banners hang limp from wind-ravaged poles, torn and frayed, their colors bleeding into the stone walls like wounds. Within the vast, drafty halls, the Lord paces. Each step echoes against the cold floor, a metronome to a time of scarcity. He counts the stores of food, his fingers lingering over the empty sacks, the half-filled barrels. Anxiety coils tight around his chest, a silent adversary. Retainers whisper in corridors, faces pale, eyes darting to the kitchen, to the stables, to the granaries. The Lord's gaze sweeps over them, a flicker of guilt shadowing the anger and fear he cannot voice. Even in command, he is powerless, a witness to the slow gnawing of famine. Outside, in the village, life has shrunk to its simplest pulse. A goat bleats pitifully in a corner, its ribs stark against the rough weave of its coat, a mirror to the children who play silently in the frozen dust. They pretend hunger is a game, their laughter brittle, cracking against the wind. Fingers scrape at the frozen earth, collecting invisible seeds, imagining feasts that will never come. Each child wears a small mask of hope, fragile and unspoken, as if belief alone could fill the belly. But their eyes betray them, the hollow sockets of hunger that no game can hide. The bells toll across the valley, slow and relentless, announcing deaths no one can stop, each chime marking another absence. Another empty chair at a table that has grown frighteningly small. The rhythm is stark, a pulse of life stripped to its barest form, survival. Every sound seems amplified, every whisper and sigh magnified in the cold air. The frost clings to cloaks and hair, scratching faces, biting at exposed skin, leaving red, raw trails in its wake. Smoke from the chimneys rises in thin, gray threads, weaving into the night, disappearing into a sky indifferent to suffering. Through the village, footsteps crunch over frozen soil. The boy's sack drags, scraping stones, rattling like bones. He pauses at the edge of a field, eyes scanning the frost-kissed ground. Somewhere, a dog howls, long and lonely, echoing the emptiness. A woman in a doorway rocks an infant, murmuring lullabies she can no longer feel. Her voice a fragile tether to a past when the hearth held warmth and not just smoke. The wind rattles shutters, rattling the fragile rhythm of their existence. And yet, in the midst of this hollowed world, there is movement. There is life stubbornly pressing against the cold. The villagers' prayers rise like smoke, invisible, drifting into the night with no reply. They pray for rain, for crops, for the strength to endure. They pray for the lives of those they cannot save. In the quiet, a man kneels at the frost-covered well, fingers brushing against the ice, murmuring the name of a lost brother. Nearby, a child traces lines in the snow, imagining maps to faraway lands, places where hunger does not dwell. Even in despair, the human spirit stretches toward light, seeking meaning in a world that seems designed to deny it. The night listens, impartial and still, offering no comfort but demanding persistence. Inside the castle, the Lord looks down from a high window, watching smoke curl from the village chimneys. He sees the pale moonlight kiss the frozen roofs, casting long, quivering shadows. He thinks of the granaries emptied too quickly, of promises he cannot keep. Each loss weighs upon him like lead, each worried glance from a servant another nail in the coffin of pride. Yet he paces, counting, planning, remembering the lessons of those who came before. That desperation can make the faithful cruel, that hunger strips civility like bark from a tree. He sighs, a sound that seems to echo through empty corridors, mingling with the groans of the castle itself, as if stone and spirit mourn together. Outside, the wind shifts, carrying with it the faint odor of thawing earth, a promise unfulfilled. Children crouch over their meager collections, hands stiff and trembling, eyes wide with the illusion of abundance. A goat lifts its head, bleeding again, and a shadow of understanding passes over the boy's face. Survival is no longer about fullness, but endurance. Every gesture, every glance, every sigh speaks volumes. Hunger has made them fluent in the language of deprivation, and yet, within that fluency, there is a strange elegance, a beauty forged in endurance. They live by fragments, by scraps, by the narrow margins of will. The moon climbs higher, indifferent to suffering, casting silver over thatched roofs and frozen fields. Shadows deepen, dancing between houses and barns, across the faces of those who cling to life. The night thickens, bringing both fear and an odd solace. The shared suffering that binds these souls together, invisible threads stretched across the cold air. A single bell tolls in the distance, not for death this time, but marking the passing of another hour in a world that has become measured in scarcity. And as the villagers settle for the night, crouched near embers, a collective breath held against the frost, there is a quiet recognition. Humanity endures not in comfort or abundance, but in the stubborn refusal to be broken. In this quiet apocalypse, every small act, the scraping of a grain from stone, the stirring of thin gruel, the bleating of a goat, the toll of a bell, becomes a testament. Each is a declaration that life, though frayed, persists. The wind carries these stories, scattering them through empty streets and frozen fields, whispering them into the ears of those who dare to listen. And somewhere, beyond the frost, beyond the hunger, a glimmer persists. The fragile, luminous beauty of human endurance, waiting to stretch again with the dawn, fragile as smoke, enduring as stone. The night closes in, a velvet shroud over suffering and silence, yet beneath it, beneath the chill, a pulse remains. A rhythm of hope, however faint, pressing insistently against the void. Shadows blend, whispers mingle with wind, and in the hush of the frozen village, a quiet question lingers. When the frost recedes and the granaries empty no more, will they remember the faces of hunger, the lessons of endurance, the fragile grace of survival in the long, bitter night? A morning fog drapes the village like a shroud, thick and suffocating, swallowing the world in muted gray. It clings to the wooden carts abandoned at the roadside, to the frost-laden thatch of huts, to the gnarled hands of the farmer bent low in the field. His fingers, red and raw, tear through soil that yields nothing, stubbornly clinging to a life that refuses nourishment. Above him, the wind carries the faint clatter of birds too hungry to sing, their wings brushing silently against the mist, fragile echoes of hope in a landscape grown silent with suffering. The air is thick with the smell of damp straw and earth, mingling with human sweat and the faint tang of fear, a reminder that survival is a ritual performed with trembling hands. Inside the stone hearth, a woman leans over the meager flames, stirring a mixture of roots and herbs. The aroma struggles to rise, feeble against the gnawing emptiness of her children's bellies. She glances toward the door, toward the field where her husband works, and for a moment her eyes meet his. In that shared gaze, there is no need for words. The day is measured in hunger, in toil, in the fragile insistence that life must continue. Every drop of water from the nearly dry well is a gift. The trickle echoes through the silence like small admonitions, a warning that time is slipping, that desperation is a constant companion. Beyond the village, the hills hold their own cruel dominion. The distant cry of wolves threads through the fog, thin and haunting, a reminder that the natural world, too, is merciless. It is a song of hunger, of survival, of death that does not wait for mercy. The villagers hear it and shiver, not solely for themselves, but for the unseen, the weak, the forgotten, the ones who will not rise with the sun. Ropes sway in the skeletal frameworks of unfinished barns. Doors creak in homes emptied by illness or flight, and every sound becomes a hymn of emptiness. Each creak and sway a testament to lives stretched to the breaking point. Even the church, usually a refuge of warmth and sanctuary, is haunted by shadows. Candles flicker, their light trembling over faces hollowed by sleepless nights and unspoken fears. In the cold stone silence, prayers are whispered into the gloom, more an act of endurance than of faith. The words are carried upward, caught in the haze of fog and smoke, echoing off walls lined with devotion that cannot stave off the gnawing pang of want. Children, too thin for their age, clutch at their mother's skirts, eyes wide and unblinking, absorbing the rhythm of despair as though it were a second skin. The sun rises slowly, burning through the fog with a muted red glow, revealing the skeletal forms of trees stripped bare by frost and hunger. Each branch is a finger pointing at the sky, accusing, lamenting, yet unable to intervene. Villagers move between their hovels with the quiet determination of those who have learned that survival is measured in patience and small gestures. Every bite of bread, each sip of thin broth, is a sacred ritual. The act of eating becomes a prayer, a fragile offering against the despair that threatens to swallow them whole. As the day stretches, shadows lengthen and mingle with the fog, and the village becomes a place suspended between life and death. The fields, plowed again and again, lie stubborn and unyielding, each furrow a scar on the earth. The farmer's hands, blistered and calloused, are both weapons and tools, instruments of defiance against a world that has offered nothing but want. His wife, tending her fire, watches the smoke curl upward, a silent hymn to persistence, to the hope that even the smallest flame can illuminate the darkness. When night falls, it drapes the village in a red haze, the setting sun bleeding across the horizon like a wound. Trees shiver in the chill, their shadows long and trembling across the frost-rimmed ground. Villagers gather in the square, speaking in hushed tones, their words swallowed quickly by the fog. Wolves cry in the distance, closer now, and the wind carries the smell of wet earth and smoke, of survival stretched to its limits. Every glance exchanged is a pact, every touch a silent vow. Endure, for the morning will come, and with it, the labor of survival will begin anew. The fog thickens as the last light fades, swallowing sound and shape alike. A child presses her face to the window, eyes wide, tracing the shadows of the skeletal trees as they dance in the dying light. Her mother holds her close, whispering promises that are both fragile and fierce, words that will not keep the wolves at bay but offer the courage to face them. In this moment, the village itself seems to breathe with the shared recognition of hunger, loss, and the stubborn will to endure. Each life, each shadow, each flicker of flame is a testament to resilience. The world outside waits with indifferent cruelty, but within these narrow streets and stone walls, hope persists in whispers, in small acts, in the quiet determination that tomorrow, the struggle will continue. As night fully settles, the village sleeps uneasily under its blanket of fog. The wind carries with it the scent of frost and distant predators, threading through empty streets and cold hearths. Yet, in the trembling shadows, there is a shared heartbeat, fragile, insistent, alive. And somewhere beyond the hills, unseen but always felt, the next day waits, heavy with toil and possibility, ready to test the courage of those who refuse to yield. The fog, ever present, cloaks both sorrow and endurance, leaving only the quiet understanding that to live is to fight against the silence, to carve meaning from the cold, and to rise again, no matter how thin the bread, how weak the fire, how long the night. The storm gathers quietly at first, a subtle shiver along the hills, like the land itself sensing its own grief. Clouds coil and thicken, dark and heavy, pressing down upon the village below as if the sky mourns with them. Each gust of wind carries the damp musk of wet earth, the acrid tang of livestock, and the faint, sickly sweetness of grain rotting in the fields. It is a smell that burrows into the memory, a warning of the hunger to come. In the narrow, uneven streets, villagers huddle in small, trembling clusters. Words pass in whispers, fragmented and fragile, carrying rumors of failing crops, of winter's unforgiving grip. Faces are hollowed by worry and fatigue, skin pale beneath the soot and frost. A young woman, barely more than a child herself, crouches over a cracked wooden table. Between her trembling fingers she holds the last crust of bread, breaking it carefully in two. She offers it to her younger brother, whose wide, silent eyes drink the sight of it like a benediction. Tears shimmer along her lashes, yet she swallows them, forcing the line of her jaw into a mask of resolve. Not far off, the smith leans over his battered forge. Once, his hammer struck iron with pride and purpose, sparks dancing like fleeting stars. Now, the clang of metal against metal echoes hollowly, each blow a reminder of strength drained by starvation. The heat of the forge does little to warm him. The fire flickers like the courage of the village, waning yet unextinguished. Smoke drifts upward from the chimneys, thin and trembling, dissolving into the gray sky, carrying with it the muted lament of a community whose days have been measured by scarcity. The tolling of the distant bell rises over the village, each chime deliberate, resonant, and laden with sorrow. It does not celebrate, it mourns. For every sound, a life claimed quietly, invisibly, by hunger's relentless hand. Mothers press their children close, rocking them in the cold night, whispering fragments of prayers their lips barely remember. Fathers walk with stooped shoulders, eyes scanning the fields as if the wind might carry a miracle from the earth. But the land is silent, frost settling like a witness over every rooftop, every cloak, every thin hand reaching for warmth. In the lofts and barns, children lie on straw, voices small yet defiant, telling stories of past feasts, imagined fields, and animals that once grazed in abundance. Their words rise into the night like sparks against the dark, fragile hope etched in each syllable. Their laughter, though rare, is a rebellion against the hollowing silence of hunger, a quiet claim that life, however threatened, refuses to vanish completely. They close their eyes with the faintest curl of a smile, dreaming of a world not yet lost to cold and want. Through the village, the wind sighs and whines, curling around the crooked corners of houses and slipping through cracks like a thief. Doors shiver on their hinges, torches gutter and hiss, casting flickering shadows over walls lined with the scars of hard winters past. Every movement is measured, cautious, every breath conscious. Hunger has a rhythm here, embedded in the very marrow of the people. It shapes hands that gather firewood, feet that carry water, eyes that scan the horizon for a promise that may never come. The young woman returns to her brother, pressing the smaller half of the bread into his palms. He clutches it as if it were gold, fingers trembling against the crust. She watches him, and for a heartbeat, the weight lifts from her chest. Not from relief, but from a recognition of shared suffering. Hunger binds them, and yet, in that binding, there is something sacred. They are witnesses to the endurance of life in its most bare and honest form. The smith wipes sweat and soot from his brow, leaning heavily against the anvil. His gaze drifts across the near-empty street, past shuttered windows and empty carts, and he sees the ghost of a village that was once alive with the riot of summer's growth. There is a grief that cannot be named, only felt, an ache carried in the bones of the old and the young alike. The forge's fire flares, casting shadows that dance and twist, and he imagines them as memories of laughter and strength, echoing faintly before fading into the night. Outside, the storm gathers with renewed intent. Rain begins in a hesitant drizzle, tapping on roofs like the fingers of lost souls. It grows heavier, hammering the ground with urgency, washing over the village, turning mud into clay that clings to boots, skirts, and fingers. The wind carries the scent of wet straw, of churned earth, and the faint copper of blood long spilled and unmarked. The village presses inward against itself, drawing warmth from what little it can, holding onto each other as the world outside becomes an elemental threat. Night descends like a suffocating shroud, shadows merging into shadows, until the village itself seems swallowed whole. From windows, a faint flicker of light fights against the darkness, a beacon of fragile resistance. Inside, families huddle, faces illuminated by the soft glow of embers, sharing what warmth and sustenance they can spare. Stories rise once more, murmurs of remembered feasts, whispered prayers, and promises of a future that may yet come. The wind outside whispers, carrying loss, memory, and the persistent, spectral pulse of human endurance. Hunger has become the unspoken ruler here, shaping every glance, every gesture, every heartbeat. It presses upon the village like a living weight, insidious and ceaseless. And yet, within this oppression, there is defiance. There is the young woman offering bread, the smith hammering against despair, the children dreaming beneath the straw. These small acts, fragile and fleeting, become the lifeblood of a people determined not to surrender entirely to the void. The village exhales as one under the cold night sky, frost settling over cloaks and rooftops, a silent witness to both suffering and survival. The storm rages, and with it, the relentless passage of time and fate. And yet, beneath the weight of hunger, the cold and fear, there burns a stubborn spark, the flickering, undeniable truth of human endurance. In the darkness, it shines, quiet and resolute, carrying the promise that life, even in its most battered form, will persist.